So, of course, the journey began with a sense of compulsion, a resolve that I had to make this journey. I didn't have a choice in this. And because I had never directed before, I'd never made a documentary before, the very first thing I did was responsibly and diligently sit down and start to research very, very heavily. I read every news article, looked at every media segment that there had been about this case. And of course, because the case had captured the imagination of the whole world, there was a lot to look at and read through. I started by making lists of the participants in the story who I wanted to interview. I knew that I absolutely did not want a narrator in this film, and that I wanted the film to emerge from the experience and attitudes and opinions and feelings of the direct participants in this story. I thought that was the way we would see the truth in blazing form. And I started very early on believing that the film would not be worthwhile if I wasn't able to speak to the rapists. For me, this was a sine qua non. And I wonder to what degree I would have carried on planning the film if I had not had the permission that I thankfully managed to get from the Director General of the most secure prison in Delhi. I started by making lists of questions for the rapists. I ended up with 150 questions.
Excuse me. Why did you want to talk with the rapists, with them?
It was, to me, an absolute imperative to speak to the rapists, because if you are making a responsible, meaningful inquiry into why men rape, how can you not talk to the perpetrators? How can you not ascertain what is in their heads, not out of the views of psychiatrists or prison psychologists or books or sociologists, but directly from them. I needed to know what it was in their minds or emotional or personality makeup that enabled them to do what they did. I needed to know what their relationships with women had been. What caused this ability to flout human rights in such a brutal way, particularly in this case, where the girl's intestines were ripped out of her body. So, one of the biggest insights for me that was yielded by my direct conversation with the rapists, 7 rapists, 31 hours, was the clear, searing understanding that these men weren't the monsters that the media prepared me to meet. It would have been very reassuring and comforting if they had been monsters. Because you see, this is society's way of distancing itself from the responsibility of having formed these opinions in the first place, in our rapists.
Yeah, created, yeah.
Society has created it.
Yeah.
So one way I express this, and I think, at the risk of repetition, it is a very, I believe, truthful distillation of what my absolute conviction here is. That it's not a case of dealing with rotten apples in the barrel, who you can hang and rub your hands with relief because society is rid of a few more rotten apples. Far from it. It's the barrel itself that is rotten, and it's the barrel that rots the apples. And the responsibility is ours. I think that's the most fundamental insight that I learned during this journey.